So the Gihon, and it's amazing, a siphon spring, one of only maybe a dozen in the whole world that work that way. So it's an amazing water system that you have there. Gihon means gusher, because what would happen several times a day, this water would be gushing out of there. And like I said, if you look in any ancient tell, a tell is an archaeological, artificial mound, you need four things to make a city. You have to have food, water, road, and defense. Any ancient city had to have that. In Jerusalem, there's only one water source. One. There's not two, there's not five, there's not three. There's one water source, and not a small source. One major water source, the Gihon, the gusher.
The Gihon spring was very unique in structure. It is literally a siphon spring and well known to geologists and hydrologists of being something that can literally pump something a great height. The Gihon spring is similar to geysers, like Old Faithful, but without the heat. That it could pump water 40 stories, 400 feet, from the bottom of the Gihon up into the temple. And there are 5 historical sources that tell us that it actually happened, that there was a fountain inside the temple. Besides the biblical information, the biblical sources from Joel, Ezekiel, and from the Psalms, several Psalms, put it all together, and there was a fountain in the temple at the top of the city of David, on the top of Mount Zion at that temple. And it also existed in the reconstruction by King Herod.
Well, the Gihon Spring is an ancient water source that's been talked about going way back to the time of Solomon. The springs are still running today. They're not of the force of water that they were a long time ago. A lot of Jerusalem has been dug up, and the rock might have, through fracturing and modern construction, have precipitated that. But the Gihon Springs has been this ribbon of water that's the lifeblood of the city of David. It's like water pumping through the veins of a human. The city of David has this water pumping through it, which gives his life, and gave it, the reason that David even took it was probably that water source. But you need to have flowing water in the ceremonial of the cleansing of several things. The priests going in the temple to worship. You need spring water to add to the ashes of the red heifer for purification. So water is essential, and there's no water on the Temple Mount, the traditional Temple Mount up above.
They've uncovered the real pool of Siloam. They just did this in the last couple of years. It's an amazing story how they found it. But what was interesting, I was down there with the archaeologist who actually found it, and he told me that that area was an acre big. And his words, not mine, he said it's the world's largest mikveh. It went off in my head, of course. 10,000 people would be mikvahing there. So the fact, if you're mikvahing and you're getting ceremonially clean down there, does it make any sense that you're going to walk a third of a mile and maybe be unclean again? So the temple would have to be close to the mikveh, particularly that it's the biggest mikveh in the world, a 10,000 person acre mikveh where the pool of Siloam is. And yet they found the stairs now, the original stairs from the Herodian period that go back up toward the city of David where the temple would have been.
So if the temple stood over the Gihon spring, then how did the buildings up on the Haram al Sharif, how did they get their water?
Well, there's 37 cisterns up there. They're very big. It's not fresh running water, but it's where they collected fresh water that could be used for Titus's 10th Legion. And the Gihon spring actually represents the water flowing from the throne of God in Revelations 22. It flows from under the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, and of course the Shekinah glory was between the wings of the two cherubim, which was on the mercy seat.
We're here in the city of David, where so many things happened in the Bible. And very interesting that Do you know just 100 years ago, nobody knew this was Mount Zion. Most people thought up to the north of here was Mount Zion. And it was actually by an accident that they even found out that this was Mount Zion by finding the tunnel that goes into where Hezekiah's tunnel is. So if they could get Mount Zion wrong for all these years, the most important mountain in the Bible, could it be possible that they could possibly get wrong the location of the temple? The historian Josephus actually proves this. Many people will say, oh, Josephus exaggerated. Josephus wasn't true in what he was saying. But when you realize that where we're standing here in the city of David was really where the temple was, and just to the north of me, where the Haram is, was actually the Fort Antonia, Josephus' writings not only become reliable, but they become most accurate. Josephus told us that the ridge we're standing on, which would have been the northern tower of the temple, was exactly 600 feet from valley to valley. Here we are standing here. This area we're standing here from valley to valley is exactly 600 feet. Not 610 or 620 or 580, but exactly 600 feet, exactly like Josephus said. But most importantly, in the last 18 years they've been doing digs here. And those digs, at least in my estimation, have proved what Dr. Martin's theory was and what many other people are coming to the conclusion, that the area we're standing in right now in the upper part of the city of David, the Ophel area, was indeed where the temple was.
Well, I wanted to film this part of the interview on the Haram al Sharif, but of course you're not allowed to film there. So we're at a scenic spot by the old city walls. But Robert, I want to ask you, what is the Haram al Sharif? What does it actually mean?
Haram al Sharif means noble sanctuary. It's where the Dome of the Rock is located, as well as the El Aqsa Mosque. It's the third most holy place in the Islamic religion.
And it's quite a wide area. So back before the Dome of the Rock and the Al Aqsa Mosque were built, back in the time of Jesus and the time of the temples, if the temples weren't standing there, then what was up there in that large area?
Well, that was Fort Antonia, and that's where Titus housed the 10th Legion, which consisted of 6,000 soldiers and approximately 4,000 support staff. And Dr. Ernest L. Martin, in his book, The Temples that Jerusalem Forgot, it goes at this from every single angle and leaves absolutely no doubt whatsoever that that was not the temple area, but Fort Antonia. And this illustration from David Sielaff's website will show you the relationship between the temple and the fort. In fact, there was a causeway connecting the fort to the temple.
Well, Robert, what about the Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, as it's more correctly known? I mean, the Western Wall is venerated by Jews and millions worldwide. Are you telling me that the Western Wall has nothing to do with the Jewish temple?
That's correct, Chris. It has absolutely nothing to do with the Jewish temple. The Western Wall is the Western Wall of Fort Antonia.
Actually, it's part of the retaining wall with additional stones above the larger, much larger foundational stones up to about 6 levels, 8 levels. It depends where along the structure this is all established. And these stones of the Wailing Wall are actually used and presumed to be the western wall of the temple.